Um, Often when you give a guest shir, it's suggested to talk perhaps about inyani diyoma, things that are on the public agenda. I feel a little bit coroned out. I don't want to speak about something of that nature. So I was looking around for something which could be inyani diyoma to a certain extent. I'm cheating a little bit. Modeva ozevi rucham. We're getting towards the middle of Shvat already. Chet Shvat, the second week of Shvat. In a week, we'll be having Tu B'Shvat. So I'm maybe stretching this a little. I wanted to talk about the trees, fruit trees. Of course, Tu B'Shvat significance is not generally about trees. In the trees, Chag, the song used to go Chag, or does go Chag La'ilanot. It's not that the trees have a party. It has to do with mitzvot tluot ba'aretz. What can I do if I'm in a mood of admissions? I am not. I've learned some mitzvot tluot ba'aretz, but I am not an expert in mitzvot tluot ba'aretz. When Eretz Chamda gets questioned mitzvot tluot ba'aretz, I usually do not answer them. I usually punt it to one of the other members of the staff. So, but I do want to talk about fruit trees at the end. Maybe we connected a little bit hashkafically, the fascination, the love that I think the Torah has, the Jewish people has with fruit trees. But we're going to do a halacha about the avera of cutting down fruit trees, and with a practical application having to do with wanting to do work. How many did everybody have? People are muted here. Feel free to mute yourself. I don't like talking just to myself. I like when people ask questions from time to time. So feel very free to unmute yourself when you have a question. Remember, if you might have background noise, then please remember to mute yourself again, so that we don't have to remind people that to get the background noise away. Okay, so the question is, people do not have source sheet. I'm probably going to be doing most of the time that we need it. I'm going to use share screen when we read things inside, but I'm assuming I sent out on source sheets that most people here do have the source sheets they could look at. Okay, the source sheets are like 2 full pages. We're not going to do all of that inside. It's not going to be a high textual share. There will be some textual looking, and I think there are things to be learned from reading the texts carefully. The question is, may one cut down a fruit tree in order to make room for improvements to his backyard for recreational purposes, such as to put in a pool or a basketball court? Okay, those are the 2 examples that the person asked. I guess if he was considering one or the other, or maybe he just had some recreational purpose, and those are just examples that we thought gave me a picture. I do not know, but that's what he sent to Eretz Chamda, that question. Now, usually cutting down a fruit tree is an isur d'oraita. Usually, when you have isur d'oraita, it's isur on Torah law. To say, well, I have a need. I have a special need to do it. You have a special need like pikuach nefesh? No, I want to build a swimming court. So maybe I can do it on Shabbos, like a basketball court or swimming pool. No, you can't build it on Shabbos because you want to have that. Obviously not. So if cutting down a fruit tree is a classic isur d'oraita, the question is totally irrelevant, illogical, and unreasonable. Okay, but as we will quickly see, even though the pasuk is in the Torah there specifically, it's learned in a certain concept, in a certain context. Okay, so I'm now going to go to share screen. Okay. So the pasuk is a pasuk in Sefer in Parshat Shoftim. Towards the end of Parshat Shoftim, there's a lot there having to do with wars and preparations and national preparations for the Knisa La'aretz. Okay, a lot of Sefer Dvarim, especially perhaps Shoftim more than any other parsha, has to do with preparing for entering the land. And war is part of entering the land at the time, certainly when they originally came in the time of Yoshua, and there was a need in other generations as well. If you're going to have a siege against a city, don't start destroying the wood, the trees of the city. Don't destroy it, eat from it. Most read is a question. You're having a war against maybe many explanations exactly pshuto shemikra. What is the war? Is the tree? Are the trees of the city your enemy? No, they're for eating. They're not to be destroyed. Okay, so that's the mitzvah from the Torah. Clearly, this is not some type of asmach, some type of mnemonic. It's talking about destroying trees. Now, sometimes we have things that are said in the Torah in a very specific way, but are actually more, the specific examples are an example of a more general type of concept. I'll give you a classic example. Lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo. Okay, milk and meat. That's the thing. Now, that's a very specific case. Do not cook a kid being from the goat family, b'chalev imo, the milk of his mother. As we know, it doesn't only apply to gedi; it applies to all mammals, and it's not just in its mother's milk. It could be in any mother. The basar can be from any mother or from any father animal, or from any animal. I mean, from those species as to anything. So the pasuk gives a specific example, but it's much broader than that. And the example is just an example. We may learn specific things from it, but it's an example. So the question is over here about Baal Tashchit. We generally call Baal, Mishnaic language, Baal meaning low. Baal Tashchit, is it said in the Torah by fruit trees? Is it limited to fruit trees? And to the answer that question is quite complex. The answer, like many things in life, is yes and no. Let's go back and see the Rambam's formulation. Okay, so he starts, Ein kotzitzin, source number 2, Ein kotzitzin ilanei ma'achal shechutz lamdina. Okay, here's his Hilchot Melachim. Hilchot Melachim deals with laws of government, partially kings. Actually, I think the full terminology is Hilchot Melachim u'milchamotehem. There's a lot about war over there, the ethics and the halachot of war. So you don't destroy their trees. You don't prevent water from going to the trees so that they'll dry up. Okay, that's pasuk we saw. Don't destroy their trees. The cholakot states if you do cut it down, loke, and you get chayav malkot, and you're liable to get lashes. But the pasuk talks about a specific case. It talks about when you're having a siege. What about there's no siege? There's no war. Anytime, no enemy, no siege. If you ever cut down a tree, a fruit tree, an edible tree, in a manner of destruction, you're chayav malkot. Your person is liable to get, in the right circumstances, flogging. Aval, okay. If it's destroying or if it's harming other trees, then you're allowed to knock it down. Or if it's causing damage to somebody else's property, it's got roots that are damaging other people's property, or maybe the branches could be ruining other people's property. We have gotten questions, what if somebody's tree is extending over and blocking my sukkah? Every year it grows a little bit more, and now it's blocking my sukkah. I don't have the only place I have to build my sukkah. There are trees that are postling my sukkah. So that would be an example. So or if it's very good, the wood is very expensive. Lo asrat Torah ela derech hashchata. Okay, the Torah only forbade this if it's in a manner of destruction. I really should have brought further halachot in the Rambam. We assume we are taught that it is not only fruit trees, that there is an avera to destroy anything. Okay, perhaps we've been told by our parents or by our grandparents, or we have told our children or our grandchildren, don't waste, don't waste food, don't destroy food, don't play with food. You're supposed to. It doesn't apply just to fruit trees, but anything you're not supposed to destroy. However, there is a difference. The only time is malkot is if it's a fruit tree. So on the one hand, Chazal extended Bal Tashchit to not be referring to specifically the situation described by the Torah, but applies to any type of hashchata, any type of destruction. On the other hand, it is a heightened issue by a specific issue when talking about fruit trees. Okay, now we're going to have to, let me give another example. We have a basic concept which is learned from a specific case, and it applies to both the specific case and similar cases, but also on different levels. Another case like that, is it also in Parshat Shoftim? No, it's the next Parshat. Parshat Ki Teitzei, building a gate for you, or a fence for your roof. Talks about a roof. But we learn from the concept of putting up a fence, what is, again, we usually, most halachot in the Torah, the halachot are not connected necessarily to the apparent reason behind it. Okay, we're not going to say the reason you can't eat milk and meat was the Rambam saying more in Avuchim. That's the reason. Where the reason doesn't apply, the halakha doesn't apply. No, we don't. As a very broad rule, we did not say that. There's certain mitzvot where Chazal understood that the two are related. That the reason behind it is actually something we should learn from. Now, sometimes it can be for a leniency, and sometimes it can be for a stringency. So, for example, a stringency by the fence is that it's not only by roofs and it's only by fences. You're supposed to remove danger. Okay, and that's learned from lo tasim damim beveitecha, that don't cause your house to be a source of danger. That applies to cases that have no house, no roof, just danger. Is also various types of danger on property is also included in this. That's an expansion of it. The question is whether it also can limit the avera. What do I mean limit? So over here again, let's go back to our case. Bal Tashchit. It's expanded from only fruit trees to anything that you destroy. Is also included. On the other hand, the Chazal picked up in a word in this thing and limited the avera to certain cases by fruit trees. In other words, it's not forbidden in all cases to cut down fruit trees. Cutting down fruit trees is not like being Mechalel Shabbat. It's not like eating treif. It's not like all sorts of specific things that you just cannot do it. But it's only in the situation of hashchata, where it's in a wasteful type of way. Okay, let's go back to the sources and see both the pasuk and the Rambam to confirm this. Kitatsur al ir yamim rabim lilachem al tofsa. So it says, Lo tashchit et eitzah. Do not destroy the trees. Now, destroying trees, okay, tashchit is a reasonable verb. but other verbs could have been used. I could have said, for example, alo takutz, don't cut down the trees. It doesn't say don't cut down the trees. It says don't destroy the trees. Now, what does destruction mean? So destruction can mean different things in different contexts. Lo tashchit could be, again, the fact that it doesn't say cut down, but it says to destroy. It could mean, for example, don't cut it. Maybe it said lo takutzi, where you would think that you're not allowed to prune the tree and say, well, it's pruning, it's just making the tree better. So tashchit means that the tree is now destroyed. The tree's not going to grow back. The tree is, but it's in all cases, no matter what, you can't cut down the tree. You could have said that, but that does not seem to be the case. The Rambam says, lo asra Torah. I'm trying to shade this as well. Lo asra Torah l'derech hashchata. Only if in a manner of destruction. In other words, in a wasteful way, in a way which is not considered productive. It's not considered productive. Again, there are all sorts of things that you're not supposed to be about tashchit to any food. Let's say to grain. You're not about tashchit to grain. No, you're not allowed to do that. Okay, so that means, what if I take grain and that's edible, right? What if I take grain and I dig a hole in the ground, and then I put the grain in the ground, and I cover it up, totally hide it, so nobody's. Would that be bal tashchit? We said that's not bal tashchit. That's called sowing. That's called planting for the next year's crop. That's not bal tashchit. Well, this grain you're not going to use again for food, are you? No. Well, no, yes and no. I'm going to use it for next year's food. That's not bal tashchit. If I take the grain and I pulverize it, I crush it until it's tiny particles of flour. Is that bal tashchit? Well, you destroyed that grain. But that's not bal tashchit, because you're doing, that's called making flour so that you can make bread. That's not bal tashchit. So everything depends on its in a case like that, it depends on its context. And by the fruit trees as well, we'll go back. We can see it in the Rambam. I want to see it in the Gemara as well. Maybe we can come back to the Rambam. Stories told in the Gemara about this halacha. Stories and halachot. The Gemara in Bava Kama says as follows: Dikla, diktoin kaba, a date tree which has growing on it a kab. A kab is a certain measure of volume, not very, very big. Also, lemiktzeh, you're not allowed to cut down the tree. In other words, if you have a tree which usually because it's very old or very sick or whatever the case might be, it has very little, has some fruit but very little, not enough to fill a kav. So then there's no prohibition. It's only if it's toyin kaba. Okay. You could say it was less than that. It's not really called a fruit tree, even though there are some fruits on it. Fine. The Gemara says that by a zayit, it's less. So it says zaytim are chashuv, and therefore even a small amount of zaytim will have a prohibition. Now we have a scary story for those who some poskim are scared by this over the generations. Amar Rabbi Chanina lo shachiv shivchat bari. Rabbi Chanina had a son named Shivchat. The only reason that he died is he cut down a fig tree before its time. In other words, I guess it was getting weaker, but it still produced a kav worth of fruit. And Shivchat said, that I don't need such a tree. Let me get rid of it. Shivchat died because he cut down the tree. That's what, in any case, that's the way his father understood it. How did Reb Chanina know? I do not know. But this concept is one which we'll see finds its way into halachic discussion of the possible danger of cutting down a fruit tree. But we go on, we learn some halachot. Amar Ravina, v'im haya me'uleh b'damim mutar. Was muleh b'damim? So Rashi below, a few lines below, says, Damavi karim lebinyan yoter mishevach perotav. Yeah, it's a tree that has some value, it has some fruit, and the fruit is somewhat edible, but the wood is very, very good wood, and the fruit is nothing to write home about. So if it's worth more for wood than it is for fruit, then you're allowed to cut it down. Okay, Tanya Namiach, we even have a Breita that supports this. Rak eitz asher teda, only if you know about it. What are we talking about? Ze ilan ma'achal, that's if it's edible. Kilo eitz ma'achal hu, but if it's not a eitz ma'achal, ze yiran srak. Okay, srak meaning nothing to it. Okay, unfortunately, it was a very famous shouting of the word srak. I don't want to get into now. A sad time in Jewish history. It's nothing. It's without fruit. So why is the kilot ma'achal? Again, why do you need to have? If things are going to be excluded anyway, why write lo eitz ma'achal? Lakdim srak the ma'achal, that it's better to do ones that has no fruit than one that has. I might think that the aver applies even if it's worth more for even if it's worth more for fruit, for the wood than for the fruit. Tamaloma rak only applies to some cases, not to all cases. Rak is called a miut, something which limits it to cases where the fruit is worth more than the wood. Shmuel aiti le'arise tamre achil. Okay, Shmuel was brought by his sharecropper a tamar, a date. Achil, he ate it. Tambu time of the chama. He said, "Well, I taste some. I can tell by the taste of this date that there's a vineyard in the area. Time of the chama. I taste some wine in it. Don't ask me. I'm not up enough on fruit to be able to know how one would taste that." Amalei my hi, what's going on here? Amalei beni gufni kaimi. It's close to the vineyard. Wow, it's having such an impact. There's so much impact one on the other. The tamar is ruining the grapes. Tomorrow, bring me the roots of this tamar tree. In other words, chop down the tamar tree because it's affecting the grapes, and the grapes are a more important fruit than the tamarim, and therefore you're allowed to, if the tree itself is being destructive, then you are allowed to knock it down. Okay, so we see from this Gemara 4 halachot. I think we learned from here 4 kulot, 4 cases, and under which you can chop down a tree. 1, it no longer is a productive tree. It produces less than a kav. It's worth more for the wood than for the fruit. It's damaging a more valuable tree. And actually not from this Gemara, but from a Gemara in Bava Batra. Gemara in Bava Batra has some very interesting discussions about relations between neighbors. And in that context, it says that if your tree is affecting somebody else's property, then you're also allowed to cut it down. Okay, that would be it's damaging, again, either to another more valuable tree or to somebody else's property. Those are 4 cases that you can learn from the Gemara that the Avirah does not apply. Okay, let's stop and digest what we've had until this point. The Avirah in the Torah, understanding that the fact is lo tashchit, not cut down, but the lo tashchit means that even though we apply this broadly, it only applies when it's something that's derech hashchata. And then we saw 4 cases where it's permitted to do it. Now, the 4 cases come in different types of categories. Some of the cases are that it's not really much of a fruit tree. Yes, technically there are fruit, but there's so few fruit that it's really not the type of fruit tree that we were talking about. We're talking about a productive fruit tree, not a tree that has minimal fruit, or if it's worth more for the wood than for the fruit, you can say that's not really a fruit tree. That's a wood tree that happens to have a couple fruit, but some little berries that, yeah, I guess they are edible, but come on, that's not a fruit tree. That's not what the Torah was talking about. That's one type. That's one category of leniency. It's not the same type of fruit tree we're talking about. The other two are cases where the fruit tree is causing damage, which makes it not worthwhile. It's damaging to somebody else, so you don't want to damage other people's things. Oh, that's something we should always internalize. You know, you want to cause damage yourself is also not good, but certainly don't cause damage to other people. Or it's damaging something else, another fruit tree. So then for the benefit of the world of fruit trees, get rid of it. It's being destructive. So to destroy the destructor, I hope nobody, I can't not mention Corona at all. If I would imagine that nobody would get angry at Pfizer for destroying viruses, preventing them. I mean, there's certain times that's not called destruction. That's called saving people. Havdil elef alfei havdalos on a much totally different plane, but just reminiscent. If it's something, if the fruit tree is damaging another fruit tree, then we don't look at it as destroying the fruit tree. We look at it as saving another fruit tree. Okay, and therefore the Aveirut do not apply in these cases. This is what we learned from Gemarot. Okay, any questions? Please feel free to ask questions. Unmute and ask questions. And by the way, those who can show me faces, I'm more of a teacher than a lecturer. At least like to think so. So I can see faces. If somebody's not up to it, then that's fine. But thank you. It's sometimes, by the way, I imagine you people have learned from, as we all learned from Zoom. Yes, Phil. How you doing, Mr. Short?
I find this, first of all, it sounded silly, but when you get into it, it really is the equivalent today of looking after natural causes and protecting the environment. So if you approach it from that way, as opposed to which pusik you bring, you have a very modern piece of work here.
Okay. Well, actually, when we get into the next point, we'll see if everybody agrees with you. I know, is it a matter of nature, the fruit, or is it a matter of good use of resources?
How about it?
Does it have to be specifically nature? Let's say I have an animal, okay, which eats up a lot of a cow eats up a lot of nature, but now I've shechted it and I have the meat. And I decide I want to just destroy the meat. I don't. So if you violate Bal Tashka there, that has to do with doesn't have to do with nature in that way. It's just something which is destructive. If you rip your clothes, okay, that would be Bal Tashchit, even though it's not nature. So one could just take the pasuk just about nature, or it could say no, this is about general.
Don't be destructive.
It could be a reasonable argument, and part of what we're going to see over here. I guess if we take that approach, we talk about the swimming pool. With all due respect, the swimming pool or the basketball court is not nature. So nature versus other purposes, nature would win. Okay, so we're about to transfer to that thing. You're entitled to your opinion. Your opinion is now going to be discussed within the context of the poskim. Okay.
Fine.
Any other comments, thoughts? Okay, good. Thank you, Mesh, and thank you for some people coming on. Now I have more people. I was about to say, sometimes in this Zoom game, you're talking, you realize that your screen has frozen and nobody is hearing you or seeing you. So sometimes when first you can see people and they're just not moving. So if I have faces, I'll see people moving. I'll know that I haven't gone off. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to go to Rishonim, several hundred years, and see if we can extend it beyond leniencies of, again, the two cases that the fruit tree is not really a fruit tree, has some fruit, but that's not really called a fruit tree, and cases where the fruit tree is causing damage to other things, whether it be a person's field or another tree. The Rush, Benu Asher, Germany, 13th century, I think would be. He pun. When I started saying I didn't mean it as a pun, branches out somewhat. Okay. The Rush says like this. Number 5. Rav Chisda, he quotes the Gemara. Basically, what the Rush is a summary of the halacha l'maisa parts of the Gemara. He cuts in what we would call nowadays cuts and pastes pieces of the Gemara, and then he adds a few words here and there, which those adding a few words teach us new halachot. V'chein, okay. Not only could the Gemara says that that if the date trees are affecting the gufni, the vineyards, then you can cut down the date trees. V'chein, similarly, im hayatzarich limkomo nir'eh demutar. If you needed the place, then you could get rid of it's mutar, then it's mutar to cut it down. In other words, the Gemara explicitly is talking about there are already tmarim and gefanim. Okay, there are already tmarim and gefanim, and you want the gefanim that already exist not to be harmed by the kalim, then you can cut down the kalim. What happens? You want to use that place, perhaps. Okay, one could read the Rush says, I have what's it called, an orchard of tamarim. I want to cut them down because I read that it's much preferable to you'll get much more money if you put their orange trees. Okay, so I'm going to cut them down and use the place. I have 15 dunam of property. I want to cut down the tamarim and plant orange trees. I will make more money that way. Am I allowed to do it? Says the Rush. Yes, you are allowed to do it. That's what I think one reading of the Rush would be. The Taz quotes the Rush, as he often does, other Rishonim, and extends the Rush. Maybe this is what the Rush meant. Maybe the Taz sent this is a concept I learned from the Rush, and I want to extend it myself further. Says after quoting the Rush, the Taz says, Taz would be 17th century. Umizeh hitarti le'echad shahaylo karka imilanot. Person had property. He lived on the property. No, it could be he didn't have a house yet on the property. He bought an orchard and it had trees. To cut down the trees, afal pishesh ben perot, they did have fruit on them. Kedei livnot beit dira aleha. He wants to build a house there. Okay, he bought this field that has fruit trees there. Now he wants to build a house. Says the Rush. Says the Taz. That's what the Rush is talking about. So I need the space. I need the space for living area. Okay. So says the Taz, I'm allowed to do that. Okay, just we'll go a little bit into contemporary discussion, where Mr. Schwartz took us a little bit about nature. I was read a few years ago a interesting point of view that we think that a nature lover lives in the woods. Got a little house or in the woods with trees all over the place and little animals running all over the place, and that's a nature lover. The person who wrote the article said, no, a nature lover lives in the city, because if he's going to live in the woods, he's going to destroy the woods. Okay, he's going to chop down trees to build his house. They're going to have to pave a road so he can get there, and then he'll pollute it etc., etc. If you really love the woods, leave the woods alone and live in the city. The taller the building, the better. Then you save more space that can be left for nature. Okay, it's an interesting perspective. The famous, what is it, a Kutzker Rebbe, that the Rebbe Kutsk, somebody said he loved, I don't know, chopped liver. He said, no, you don't love chopped liver, you love yourself. If you really love nature, so let nature be. Okay, come, you walk through it. Okay, you won't disturb nature if you just walk through it, but don't build a house over there. So, sometimes you go in these neighborhoods and, okay, I'm doing here Torah Mitzion. When I was in Memphis, Tennessee as a Rosh Kollel, so there are a bunch of streets in the neighborhood. They're named after groves. Okay, a sycamore grove and this tree grove. I don't know for sure if they just liked the name or because in order to build these houses, they needed to cut down all these trees. And as a monument for those trees that they cut down, or maybe they left a couple in people's backyards, I don't know, they named the street after the trees that used to be there. But says the Taz, based on either his understanding of the Rush or his extension of the concept you find of the Rush, that it doesn't have to be that the fruit trees are already destroying something else. Even if I just want to use the land, the logic being that's not called destroying, that's called progress. Okay, again, different people have different philosophies about what's important in the life, in the world, and within humanity. Should we care just about humans? Should we care about the environment? Should we care about the environment because we care about people, or should we care about the environment because we care about the environment? Do I want species not to go to extinct because maybe I'll need those species to create some medicine, or because of the food chain or something like that? Or do I want to keep biodiversity because God created the world with diversity and I just shouldn't destroy it? There are different outlooks. I am not getting now into a whole discussion of that somewhat important topic within humanity. But the Taz, in any case, does extend it. Most poskim, including the Chaim Sha'al, Rav Ovad, you should know any topic you can find a. Okay, Mishpachat Dan. Okay, I know the name. Absolutely. What was I saying? Yabia Omer. If you can find that any topic, Tshuva and Yabia Omer, Rav Ovadia's longer sefer, longer Tshuvot. He has two major Shelot to Tshuvot Sfarim. One's called Yechavedat, one's called Yabia Omer. Those who maybe made Aliyah a long time ago may remember that the Rav Ovadia used to have a little radio show, a short radio show where he would talk about a certain halachic topic. Those are the ones that are written up in Yechavedat. Yabia Omer those are relatively short answers, and Yabia Omer has longer answers. So he has a long discussion on these topics. And he brings many who say that not only the Rush say in order to build a house, but you can even do it to extend your house. You already have a house, it's livable, but the house would be more livable if you can build on another few rooms. You're allowed to expand the house in order to do that. In those discussions over there in the that are brought, some say the following idea. We know anything a Jew is not supposed to do, he is not supposed to have a non-Jew do for him. Interesting thing, many have heard of the Avirah, of the Isur of Amir al-Nachri. Okay, not to tell a Nachri to do something that you can't do yourself. This is very famous when it comes to the laws of Shabbat. And many people think, okay, that only applies to Shabbat. But the Gemara in Bava Metzia and Daf Tzadi says, no, it applies to all sorts of things. So, for example, the question, the question comes up, a serious question about neutering animals. Some pet owners do or want to do. And that is a halachic problem, very severe halachic problem. And say, okay, we'll give it to somebody else, they'll do it. We'll give it to a association of non-Jews, and they'll do it. So that's also l'char problematic. If they do it on your behalf, that's also Amir L'Nachri. I'm not going to get into all the details on that. Somebody wants to send us a question, Eretz Chamda. We can give you old answers or write a new answer, depending on the case. But there's Isur of Amir L'Nachri. But still, it's not as severe if it's something that Goyim are not mitzvah on and Jews are. Amir L'Nachri is a rabbinic violation as opposed to doing it oneself. Okay, let me not able to. Okay, some suggest that also it would be better as far as the danger matter. Remember, we saw the story about Shivchat Bari of Rabbi Chanina's son died. Why did Rabbi Chanina's son die? He was mitzuveh on not knocking down trees, and he said, whatever, I can be lenient on it. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu cut him off. Rahman al-Islam cut him off. But if one gives it to a non-Jew, since a non-Jew is not obligated in this halakha, it's in no way one of the Zayim Mitzvot Bnei Noach, so he's not doing anything wrong from his perspective, so it's not going to be dangerous for him. So leaving it by us where it might be forbidden to us, that could be dangerous. If we give it to somebody who's not, even though again it's not perfect, if it's truly forbidden for us, there'll be a problem. But if you have a case which is borderline, many poskim, the Taz would say it's mutar. So then, well, but maybe the Taz is wrong. So in such a case, to give it to a non-Jew to do the work for you would be preferable. One of the people I believe who says that is Chaim, is the Shelat Yavitz from Yaakov Emden, famous Ashkenazi posek about 300 years ago approximately. Fine. So now we have this Rush / Taz's approach, which will be give us ammunition to say that perhaps it's mutter for a swimming pool and a basketball court as well. So the first question we have to see, do we paskin like this Rush or do we not? So as there sometimes is, the Achronim dispute whether we accept this or not. The Beit Yaakov, there are many Sfarim by that name, but the Beit Yaakov, one of the Sfarim called Beit Yaakov says that Tosfos disagrees with the Rush and is not in favor of accepting him. The Meshiv Davar, that is the responsa sefer of the Netziv, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin. The Rosh Hashiva Volozhin, he has another problem with it and says that if you cut down the tree, you're definitely cutting down the tree with the hope of building a house later. But at this point, it's destructive. Are you allowed to destroy now based on the hope to do it later? What was the case in the Gemara? The cases we had in the Gemara were either they're already not worth anything or it's already causing damage. So removing the damage. But to do something just based on the future, I plan to, maybe you'll cut down the tree and you won't build the house or won't extend the house. That could be a problem. It could be a problem, first of all, if I don't do it. Second of all, it shows that on the first level, it's destructive. So that we have, anybody know another halacha that you have that you want to destroy something in order to build, but we're not sure to trust you that you'll get it done. So we have the halacha of a shul, of selling a shul in order to buy another one, or destroying a shul in order to rebuild. That the Gemara, again, there's not a share on this, and there when yes and when not, but just the basic concept applies over there. Sure, it's easier to knock down than to build. Knock it down. Now you don't have a shul. Then all of a sudden there's a recession, there's a whatever, and you can't, and you don't do it, or it's going to drag on forever and for a long time. So that's something they were not looking into. So a similar idea the Meshiv Davar says that if you are cutting down, that's destructive, just in the hope of the future, that might not be good. However, However, in the final analysis, if you take a look at most of the Achronim, most Achronim do accept the Rosh versus slash the Taz, and do say that if in the greater scheme of things, it is productive, then that's what we look at. I gave examples. Perhaps these are exaggerated examples. I accept the possibility, but just as at least as a what we call the saber to ozen, to sort of put things as a concept. We have what I want to say. The example I gave about taking the grain and putting it in the ground. That also one could also argue, well, it's certainly destroying it now. And you just hope that things will grow. Things don't always grow. Sometimes, would that be Baal Tashchir? You say, obviously not. You're doing it in a way that if you asked a normal person, a normal agricultural advisor, does it make sense to take some of the grain and plant it? Say, obviously it makes sense. If obviously it makes sense, and you do it. So we can disagree with the Meshiv Davar, as most seem to have said, listen, it makes sense. This is not called destructive. This is the way that you build. And fruit trees are perhaps not there for their own purposes. They're to serve man. If you remember correctly, in Parshas Bereshis, they were basically just for man, mainly for man's enjoyment and eating. He wasn't eating meat. He was eating fruits. So if it enhances man's life, that he can get rid of a fruit tree in order to do something which is more important, and he's not doing it in a destructive way, in a way he's being mizalzel. But that's called, there are fruit trees all over the place. I need to live also. I need to build a house myself for my children. Baruch Hashem, the family is expanding. I need to expand the house. That's not considered destructive at all. And that would also be mutter. So that is the more accepted approach. The next question is, okay, I'm allowed to do it for Mikomo because I need the space. How important does that need have to be? How important does the need have to be? So if you take a look in the Gemara doesn't talk about needing to be very, very a clear win that you make tremendous amount of money by doing, and that's what it makes it permitted. It talks about that this fruit is worth more than that fruit, is worth more for wood than it is for fruit. It doesn't have to be 15 times worth by 15 times more for wood than it is by fruit. Sounds like even a small advantage for the wood, you're allowed to do it. So would you say that if you need the place for something else, and you need the place, if somebody expands their house, adds on another 3 rooms, it can raise the price of the house by hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's huge. How much is the fruit tree worth? Not anywhere near that amount of money. That certainly seems worthwhile. So at first glance, that would seem to apply. However, there still is a difference, because we're talking about a case with the tree. Some of the case in the Gemara, the tree was not really viable. It didn't really make sense to have the tree there. Over here, the tree is viable. You just want to say you want to give something more. A tree that is expensive for wood and is also have fruit, but the fruit are not valuable. When you plant it, it is slated to be used for the wood. That's its nature. And therefore you do it. But we have the tree. These trees are wonderful. If we had a collection of these trees, you would use these trees for producing dates and selling them and eating them. They're totally viable, and therefore it's not necessarily the same thing. Some poskim, the Shelat Yavis I mentioned before, in his tshuva, he was talking about that there was a shul that was too small, and therefore he needed it to produce it. Okay, maybe that's a special mitzvah purpose. Maybe that is enough of a reason. The Chavot Yair lived about I guess 300, 350 years ago. His name was Yair Orbach, I believe was his name. Sefer's named after, I think, his grandmother. And for those, you don't need to know too much Yiddish. In Ashkenaz, it's not Chavot Yair, but it's Chavis Yoir. And I think it was his grandmother, his mother or grandmother. His name was Chava. So the Sefer is sort of Chava's Yair. Okay, the Yair of Chava. Okay, so I think it was his grandmother. I was a great scholar. She used to argue with the Rabbanim, and he writes, and she was usually right. So he named the Sefer after him as his mother's son. So the Chavaz Yair was talking about a case where the trees were causing the house to be dark. And in those circumstances, they were causing damage, you could do it. But if you just wanted to remove it because you wanted more place to walk around, to make it more pleasant to walk around in your backyard, he said that was not reason. And many poskim take a middle of the road approach, which is say it doesn't have to be an off the charts need. It doesn't necessarily have to be a mitzvah need. It doesn't have to be a mitzvah need, but it has to be a serious need. Okay. Again, each case is talking about a slightly different thing, and it's always hard to know exactly what the case was and how that would translate into modern times. I would just point out that the idea of the mitzvah need, there is a Gemara, maybe in Menachos, I don't remember which Masechet, that talks about cutting down, talking about using certain wood for burning on the base of Mikdash and the Mizbeach. You would need wood to burn. So one of the things that was discussed there was a certain tree, which was a fruit tree, and using its branches for the Atzei HaMaracha, for the wood used on the Mizbeach. So there's a machlok among the Rishonim. Why was that? How were they able to cut down those branches? So some Rishonim say because it was mutter because of the mitzvah, and some say it was mutter because he wasn't cutting down the tree; it's only cutting down the branches. So by each of those questions, are you allowed to cut down a tree for a mitzvah? Let's say I want to build a sukkah here, but I have a backyard. I need to cut down the tree, the fruit tree, in order to build the sukkah. Could I cut down the fruit tree? So some would say, yes, we can learn from that Gemara about the Atzei Maracha, that for a mitzvah, you're allowed to do it. Others say, no, that's talking about just cutting down branches. You can't cut down a whole tree for the mitzvah. So what about if I want to cut down branches, but not for a mitzvah? So some say, oh, we see the cut down branches. No, you only cut down the branch because of the mitzvah. So what the Achronim do learn from here, that if you want to cut down branches for a mitzvah, then you're allowed to do it. And therefore, going back to the case I mentioned before about the sukkah, if somebody's tree is growing and growing, extending, and every year extends a little bit more, and now my sukkah is puzzle, then you can certainly cut down branches, leave the tree, and cut down branches in order to make the mitzvah a possibility. Another case that will come up, question that will come up, is alternative. In other words, I want to put the swimming pool here. Swimming pool is very important. It's very healthy. It's very enjoyable. It raises the value of the house by a lot. All the neighbors have swimming pools. My kids will be the laughing stock in their school if they don't have the swimming pool like everybody else. I come from New York. We didn't have such things, but places in Florida where that's standard to have a swimming pool, just a different climate, okay, you need a swimming pool, but perhaps the swimming pool could have been a little bit smaller and then you wouldn't have to cut down the tree. Or maybe you could put the swimming pool, instead of doing it there's a mitzvah to teach your son to swim, correct? I don't know if you need your own swimming pool in order to do that. You could, do it at the local pool, but in any case, I do think that's a nice point as well. what was I saying? You wanted to build it. The architect said to do it on the east side would make more sense. But there are fruit trees on the east side. If I do the west side of the property, they don't have to cut down the fruit trees. But there's an advantage to this, advantage to that, say advantage this, advantage to that. There's a nice to do it. It's only for terrible need. I need to expand my house. I can only do it in one direction. I can't expand to the street. I can only extend to the back. So then you can cut it down. But if you could do it somewhere, even though it makes a little bit less sense, tough. Do it the halachically right way and care about the trees, and don't do it if you don't have to. So listen, any given case has all sorts of different factors. In this case, we felt as far as bottom line was concerned, there's one more fact, there's one more leniency which can be considered. And that found both the Shelet Yavis and the Chassam Sofer mention this possibility. No. This one is, I think both the Chassam Sofer and Shelet Yavis talk about this possibility, and that is not to just to cut down the tree, but to transplant the tree. It is possible. It can be a little bit expensive, and it can be a little bit dangerous for the tree. Trees like to stay where they are, but it is possible to dig up the roots and transport the tree with roots and soil to another place and replant it. Okay, either another place on your property, or find a neighbor who would be willing to take the tree and do that. In such a case, many say that's not called being oker a tree, or being a mashchit a tree. It's just moving a tree. I did a little bit of reading on the topic. Doesn't always work. Sometimes the tree die, but it would presumably not be considered, according to many poskim, it would not be considered hashchata. Again, there is an expense of doing it. If you're going to just pull it, get Paul Bunyan and just pull the tree out, it's probably not going to last. You have to do it in a proper way. That would be a leniency. Another leniency would preferably, if you do it with a non-Jew, again, who's not mitzuveh, and therefore any avera that would be of a lower level. It would only be a mirah nochri, plus the danger would not exist since he is not mitzuveh. There's no reason for him to be endangered by doing that. That would be, those would be cases that we could consider it. Again, the specific case, how important is the need would be important question, and whether you do it in a way which has sources for leniency. Again, using a non-Jew would make it more kal, transplanting it would be more kal. If it's an old tree that has almost no fruit, again, you'd have to check if it has enough fruit to be al pi halacha to be considered or not. It's actually an interesting question whether you, if it's a tree that needs some help, or you're allowed to not help it. Okay, I did have a situation in my property when I came to the house I live in now. We had old grapevines. I don't know exactly how old, but they were producing fruit, but not really the type. Maybe if I knew to take care of it, it would produce ones that you'd want to eat, but it wasn't really all that incredibly. I don't know if I think I sometimes used it a little bit, but it wasn't much left. I think grapes, from what I understand, you're supposed to water them. And that area I wanted to use for a sukkah. I had one area for a sukkah. My back was getting, as a family was expanding, got bigger. So at one point I stopped watering them. Again, I don't understand from growing grapes. And they got to the point that they weren't producing any fruit, or almost no fruit. And once I got that point, then I removed them. I believe that grapevines do not last for, they're not redwoods. They don't last for thousands of years. They don't even last for hundreds of years, or I think most of them are about 20, 30 years. Trees. We have another tree in my front, the way up to my house, a shesek tree. that when we moved in, used to produce fruit, no longer produces fruit. It's barely alive at this point. So that in some cases might be a situation that not to help it out. Oh, by the way, I talked about cutting off branches. There's no question you'll have to prune. If the pruning is good for the tree, again, it's only derech hashchata. If you're doing it to improve it, there's no question whatsoever. Okay, any halachic questions about the halachic analysis before I go a little bit to hashkafa, a little bit of thoughts about fruit trees in 7 days before Tu B'Shvat. Any questions at this point? Okay, so it's interesting. There seems to be on to a great level a sort of love story between at least humans or Jews who have sensitivity towards nature and fruit trees. That Paski Adam Eitz Sadeh. It's probably Pshutoshim across to read it as a question, but many read it also as there's a comparison between a tree and a human being. Sometimes great human beings are called ilanot. So we're talking about ilane ravravi, great trees that they're talking about Talmidei Chachamim. Perhaps somebody here went or had a child or a grandchild who went to a university, which is named by after a tree. You know what I'm talking about? Sort of named after a tree. Actually, I mentioned the person's father just a few minutes ago. Bar Ilan University is named after Meir Bar Ilan, one of the big religious Zionist leaders. Meir Bar Ilan, where did he get he was born, not Meir Bar Ilan, but Meir Berlin. Okay, he was the son of the Netziv. The Netziv was married, had a bunch of children, including Chaim Berlin, a famous Talmid Chacham. And then his wife died, and he remarried a younger woman, actually his niece, and had a son. I don't know if he had other children, Meir, who changed his name from Meir Berlin to Meir Bar Ilan. I understand. I'm not an expert on the life and times of Meir Bar Ilan, but I understand that the idea was Bar Ilan, that his father was this big tree, this big rabbi. That's it obviously sounds like Berlin, Bar Ilan. So we compare, and some people say that's the idea of the upshare, and for those who have that minhag, the 3 years with the tree, like Orla, a child is like a tree. So maybe that is related. Again, Bal Tashit in general applies to being destructive. And the Sefer Chinuch talks about the nature of the mitzvah is to be concerned about not wasting, about using that which Hashem gives us in a proper way, and not being mezalzel in the brachot that Hashem gives us. That's a basic idea. But the paradigm of this is the fruit tree, because that has a certain special respect that it gets by us. It's one of the things, if you compare it to, say, vegetables or grains, those things totally need to be replaced all the time. Whereas a tree has its roots in the ground. Okay, and that we want to know on some of you make a bari priya adama, bari priya eitz. The famous question with bananas, etc., is it something that the tree remains? So the tree remains. It has roots, and the roots get deeper and deeper, hopefully stronger and stronger if things go well, and they can have new fruit every year, but they stay from generations. There are trees that have gone through all sorts of times and seen also, if you want to look at it in that way, look at it as a human being, so to speak. I've seen many different things. I'm somewhat of a nature lover. There are bigger nature lovers than I. Perhaps I should be more of a nature lover. But to me, it was very sad. I understand that this past summer, California's horrendous forest fires destroyed many, many redwoods that had been thousands of years old. Redwoods were destroyed. I don't know if they grow up, if they're certainly not going to get to that height anytime soon. To me, that's okay. It's not a fruit tree. That's a sad thing that we have already in Gan Eden. We have this idea that the fruit trees are comrades of mankind. They're to serve man. They're to inspire man to be nechmad lemar'eh, tov lahaskil. The idea of the zera, eitz pri, oseh pri, all these are concepts that that make us feel a connection to the ilanot. Okay, so again, as far as this is not a shir on Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat, those are halachic terminologies as far as ma'asrot that I have not touched on at all. But this idea that the fruit or something that connects us to the land, and we destroy fruit, we're being mezalzel in what God Hashem is, the fruit itself, and in and the land. Okay, this is something which is, I think, deep in our roots. I do have memories from the school days when we would get, I was in elementary school. My first trip to Israel, I was, 5th grade, 6th grade. I remember from where I had never been in Eretz Yisrael, and to get the fruit from Eretz Yisrael was an inspiring thing. Hope they really were from Eretz Yisrael. I know my wife gets upset. She will tell the store owner she is not happy if she goes in Tu B'Shvat, and for Tu B'Shvat they have an array of fruits from Turkey. She is one not happy camper. That's also, Shem created those fruit also, but something paired to Eretz Yisrael is a special thing. I know they used to get to Europe. I read from Rav Yisraeli's writings. I did a lot of translating of his writings about getting the fruit in Russia, getting the fruit from Eretz Yisrael, what type of impact it has. So mankind and Jews have a love affair, hopefully, with Eretz Yisrael, with the fruits of the land, Ta'ish ba'etzim ayin, with the fruits of the land help connect us to it. And as far as Baal Tashchit is as well, there are the technical halachic points, which are very important. Practically, you want to build and not the various shitot, the various possibilities, do this, do that. These all apply, but it's also an emotional thing to feel the connection that we have to the rest of nature, and how Hashem put us here together for them. L'ovda l'shamra, that yes, to eat the fruit, but also l'ovda l'shamra, in order to preserve the world that was grown in it, and make it a place which is a better place to live in, a good place which is good for all that Hashem created within the land. I thank you for spending this time with me. Any questions? I want to get off to give people time to get up and take care of them, to enjoy Rabbi Liebtag's shir, which I'm sure will be wonderfully insightful, as it always is. So I sign off with that. Have a good day.
Yashir Koach. Bagel? Bagel?